All right, and welcome to the now fourth episode. Time's flying by, Chris, of The Beautiful Mind in the Beautiful Game. My name is Gabe Nocer, and with me always is Chris Weehan. Chris, you want to give yourself a little introduction? It's great to see you as always.
Great to see you as well. Time, as they say, is moving fast these days, Gabe. Can't believe we're already filming episode 4, but yes, my name is Chris Weehan. I played professional soccer for 7 years, and now I am a coach, really working with athletes specifically on the mindset piece in order to help them reach collegiate soccer, professional soccer, and whatever their goals are, and most importantly, just have a good experience as well within their sport. So, Gabe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm Gabe Nocer. I am a transformative life and performance coach. Among other things, I work with parents of athletes, specifically soccer players themselves, and coaches. And, I believe it's all part of one team. Parents, athletes, and coaches are all important. And the more harmonious they can work together, the more benefit they will all get, but especially the players. That's what it's about ultimately. But, everybody has to be strong within that team. And when it's not working harmoniously, then it can lead to burnout, which is the topic that we're going to focus on today. And I think, you know, we all have experience with burnout at times in our lives. I know you had burnout as a player, and I want to just go there right away. When do you think you felt the most burnout in your soccer journey, and what were the circumstances that led to that?
Yeah, there was many times, I guess, that you experience burnout. I think particularly there's always the burnout at the end of the season. I think everyone sort of feels that the longevity of a 10-month season in professional soccer, even collegiately, a sprint of a 3-4 month season can be exhausting. And I think everyone kind of reaches this point where you're tired. So I specifically remember in my career hitting those points of sort of wishing for the off season. As not right as that sounds, it doesn't feel right to wish that, especially if you're wanting to win a championship.
Mm.
But particularly in my career, I experienced burnout probably for the last 3 seasons, where I was really starting to feel like, all right, it's coming to an end. And I wrote down a couple reasons that I think that I believe why that happened for me, and I'm sure a lot of players would relate. But I kind of want to just put the first one out there, and I'd be curious to get your perspective as a coach, but also working with coaches and players. So I wrote the first one as when you're no longer what you're putting in is no longer returning to you. And I'm
Mm.
curious to know kind of what you think of that.
So, I want to hear a little bit more. What do you mean by that exactly?
So I believe that, what you put into the world will return to you. But there was a part of me that felt like I was putting, and maybe it was more the longevity of my career, that I had put my whole life into it, and it was no longer giving me what I felt like I had like given to the sport. It was no longer giving me that joy, that love, that satisfaction. That piece was no longer returning to me. I loved soccer, and I loved the feeling of stepping onto the field and playing a game. But over the course of a 10-month season, specifically in the last year, I remember, it felt almost like I was having to drag myself there. And
Mm.
so it felt like I wasn't getting that love back and that joy back for what maybe collectively I had put into it over the course of my life.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's very common. And, it's every professional soccer player I've worked with feels that burnout. And I think a big part of that, one, they've been doing it for so long, right? And it ends up being a grind. It becomes a job, and it's a job where you're constantly threatened to not have a job at any moment, right? Based on your performance. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah.
So, when when you feel like you're constantly under threat, it's easy to lose that joy. And I'm pretty sure when we worked together, I had you shift and focus on like, hey, you get to play soccer. What if you just went out there and just really focused on the love and the joy that you had in every moment of playing it, because so much can be true at once. You can have the stress of the job or understand that your job is totally reliant on how you are going to perform on the field, right? You can have that. That's true. And you can also focus on the joy and the love and the connection that you have with your teammates, right? And even your coaches, even the staff, So it's about like ends up filling yourself up with as much love as possible in those little moments. So because you had a shift, in your life, where I saw you have some ups and downs emotionally, especially when you were in California playing for Orange County, and then you came back to New Mexico United. You were like on fire again. I could see that joy. And so what shifted within you in those two moments?
Yeah, well, there was a couple moments when you were talking about that that came to me, and one was really when my career got started. And, you know, exactly like what you're saying, my career was really on the verge of not happening at all. Coming out of the MLS Combine, I don't get drafted. I get one call to go on trial, and that trial, I wish I could play that image for people. It was ugly. Like I wasn't playing well. They had basically divided the two teams, the players that were rostered and under contract already, and then all these trialists. And there was a bunch of us. And I just felt like I was getting lost in the weeds kind of over here. And basically at one moment in like 2 days of training with the group of contracted players, and that kind of spurred the coach to give me a contract. Well, the contract offer was terrible. It was zero guaranteed dollars at first, but I remember, negotiating it up to like $500 a month, and that was the big shift for me. It was like, okay, I can feel this pressure of like this sucks, and like I have no value, or I could have shifted into like, hey, like what an opportunity, like you get 1 year, like you sign for 1 year, like that's amazing. You'll get to say that you played professional soccer to some degree and make the most of it and have fun. And I worked at a restaurant and like I had a blast doing that, and like made a whole like community of people in Reno, Nevada. And then that kind of just propelled like that, taking that approach to it really propelled my experience into having a great year. And my trajectory of my career started going upward from there. And that moment as well, going to Orange County and feeling the pressure of people. And another thing that I kind of touched upon and why I burned out was my views in the way in which I felt like doing things, the way I felt like expressing myself, the way I felt like people should be treated was so out of alignment from what the overall organization and people that were in the club were doing
Hmm.
in Orange County. And so that misalignment was really difficult for me to navigate. And so I started burning out there. And when I came back to New Mexico United, it was like I was like free of that. Like I felt more like I could just show up as myself. I genuinely like was excited to see the people that I was going to be working with. And that like connection to those people was like so uplifting. And I remember I got sold from Orange County to New Mexico United. And I remember thinking about that, being like, wow, like there's a bit of pressure on, there's a bit of weight on that.
Hmm.
And at the time, wasn't a ton of money, but it was at the time I think like the biggest interleague transfer. So like from a USL team to another USL team, it was the biggest monetary transfer at the time. And I remember like being like, okay, I could really feel the pressure of that and like let that like override, or I could just, choose this sort of this free like play with this freedom.
Mhm.
And I chose that, and it gave me a whole new sense of motivation.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, you had that connection as you put it. That was a very strong word for me that when you said that, I was like, yeah, that's love, right? Like you were
Yeah,
excited to see these people. And, sometimes when you see something that's not ideal or you go through an experience that's not ideal, and then you go to one that's more ideal, you can really see the difference and you can really start to appreciate it. Because I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that you appreciated your experience in New Mexico United when you went back over there because you could see like the comparison between the two environments. Is that right?
very much so. And I think more so than the environment, the coach to player relationship felt very transactional on one side and very loving and caring on the other side.
Hmm.
And that was a big thing for the shift.
Hmm. Yeah, and that really is one of the big factors that prevents burnout is to have a really healthy team culture and for the players to feel connected, one to the coach and to each other. And that's where, it's really helpful to do like team building stuff. When I came and worked with when you were your first round with New Mexico United and I came and worked with you guys, we did some team building stuff, but I could already see like this team is really connected. And you guys had that was your first New Mexico United's first season ever.
Yeah.
And I could see like the connection to that. And I know Troy Lassane, the coach at the time, was really focused on that.
Hmm.
And I could tell that team culture was very, very important. And that's going to help no matter if you're a professional player, college player, or youth player. If you feel connection with your brothers or sisters, and also with the coach, that is what a healthy environment is. So, and that's a big part of intrinsic motivation. A big part of it is connectedness with each other. And, for parents out there, there are tricks, and I actually have a free guide on my website of how to help your child build intrinsic motivation. And that's a big part of it is to help them feel that connection, that relatedness, like, you have their back no matter what. And that's so important for teams. Like, coaches, of course, have to uphold high standards, but they also have to make sure and have that relatedness and that connection with their players, no matter if they're the number 18 player or in the front in the 11, you know? Um, so, that's a huge part of it. And, for kids, especially if they have a sense of autonomy and kind of sense of choice, where in the college game, in the professional game, even in the youth game, you don't have much choice. But at least if a coach or if a parent can at least communicate and get their feedback and get their word, it's like, hey, what do you think about this? That at least starts to help a child or help a professional or college athlete to feel that sense of autonomy, like, hey, I at least was heard. And, the coach didn't necessarily take my feedback and apply it, but at least the coach told me why, so that sense of autonomy. And, the other part of help building intrinsic motivation is for, players to feel like they're capable of doing something. And that's huge for kids as well. And that's something I think enough coaches and parents don't focus on. A lot of them try, but they look at the end result like, hey, great goal that you scored. Where like true like sense of mastery comes with focusing on the little details. Hey, I loved how you took that glance over your shoulder, and before you turn the ball, you turn the right way to be able to create a little bit of space to finish or whatever it is. Something specific, not so much the end result. There are studies out there that are showing that players who have a high amount of intrinsic motivation, they have a less rate of burning out and dropping out. And I think that's something that a lot of parents can use to focus on and coaches as well.
Yeah, and intrinsic motivation is sometimes it can't always be taught, right? It's sort of fostering that, like, how motivated am I to like pursue this? And a big teacher of mine right now is someone that talks heavily about following your passion, act on your passion until
Mhm.
it until you can take it no more. And that's been a message that's been sticking. I think that goes hand in hand with intrinsic motivation. And going back to our conversation around the parent athlete relationship, one thing that I think my parents did so well was fostering that motivation to allowing me to pursue soccer as much as I wanted to pursue it. If I loved it, if I enjoyed it, if I wanted to sign up, absolutely. Let's sign up. Let's play it. Oh, I want to play. Hey, I'm curious about playing volleyball. Go for it. Do it. Yeah, have fun. See if that's what you want to do. You know, that allowing that intrinsic motivation to be pursued. One thing that came to me when you were talking is team building. And I think that is such a massive piece. I didn't sort of realize that until you said it about burnout and collective burnout. And when I think of my career, the years that I think things were going really well, there was a balance between the responsibilities of being a part of the team in terms of like practice, we're showing up to practice, or community service events, but then also giving enough space and encouraging players to pursue things outside of those set responsibilities to
Mhm.
allow for organic and natural team building. So, for instance, my first year when I played in Reno, Nevada, I think there was a ton of space created for us to pursue, who you like to hang out with on the team and team culture moments. We were starting off the season as a new organization. 3 or 4 games, we maybe scored 1 or 2 goals. I think we had one tie. We had 3 losses. We didn't. We felt like we didn't have an identity. It was, it didn't look great, and our coach said, "Hey, we're going up to Tahoe on Tuesday. We're playing a scrimmage against Tahoe Community College, and you guys have everyone can. Here's a bunch of hotel rooms. You guys can stay the night in South Lake Tahoe if you want after the game. You don't have to. Wednesday's going to be off, so you're welcome to stay up there and do whatever you want." And so there was, I would say probably 75% of us decided to stay after this game. And we had an amazing night in South Lake Tahoe. And, yes, of course, we were at a bar and there was a team bonding and action, but it was organic. It wasn't forced. It was you could do
Mhm.
it if you want. And majority of us stayed together. We all decided to go to the same place. We had an amazing night. There was a funny moment where someone lost a bet. They had to buy this painting from the bar, and it lived in the locker room. And everyone, like, it was something that kind of like brought us together. It was a painting of Khaleesi from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, nice.
And like, I think when we clinched playoffs towards the end of the regular season, we had a team picture, and there was Khaleesi at the center of our team. So it was that organic team building that kind of brought us all together in that way.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff is huge, because it opens your heart, right? You always have that connection, that deep connection in those special moments, especially like you said, when it's organic and not forced. And that's something that's so valuable and prevents players from dropping out. And you can do that at the youth level, not necessarily go to a bar and do
Yeah.
things, but there are so many other things you can do, like that sense of connection is so powerful because it's love, right? And love is like such a powerful force. And I still see coaches out there that are coaching out of fear, which shows up in a lot of different ways. I was very interested in I watched college, or I pay attention to college football, And Syracuse played this last weekend. They played UConn and apparently were behind in the fourth quarter and had to come back. And so the coach made the whole team run sprints after the game in the stadium. There's still people there. The band was playing, like, and making the team run sprints. And I'm like, that is, I understand the perspective, right? Wanting to uphold high standards and motivate players. But on the other side of that, it's led from fear because it really came from frustration of the coach, right? And then what that can do, when you're running sprints after a game in front of fans and it was on ESPN website and it's gonna also add some, not so great feelings, right? It's feelings of embarrassment, right? And and it what I've found is fear can be a great motivator sometimes, running sprints or whatever it is, if it's coming from frustration of the coach, but it's very short term. And in the long term, it can do much more damage to the team culture and to the motivation and can lead to burnout, right? I have no problem with making a team run sprints afterward. I did it, but not after a game, first of all. And I would never do it in public like that. Like there are times to do it and say, hey, we're gonna, at best case, if you're gonna make a team run sprints, take them to the locker room, go find a place to go run sprints if you're that mad at them, but not in front of other people. There's so much damage, but there are so many different ways to handle it. But I've always found that like you can have a balance of operating from love and also upholding your high standards as well, and that's going to prevent burnout.
Yeah, that's so true. I believe in that as well. I think there's sport is so stressful already. And I think making decisions like that you're referring to adds stress into it unnecessarily. And I completely agree with you. You can you can making the organization bend like that. I think there's bending in order to strengthen, and then there's bending in a way that's going to eventually break. And
Hmm.
that I think is adding stress where that bend is eventually going to break. And I think about times, I remember specifically in college, we had a very tough, strict workout regimen, specifically in the spring season. It was very, very tough, and physically and mentally. And that bending, forcing us to bend like that, brought us together. I remember
Hmm.
moments getting my butt kicked on sand dunes in Albuquerque on like a windy Friday, cold afternoon in the spring, but like, pushing myself with my teammates, and then like we all get through it together and like standing at the top of the sand dunes, like with our arm around each other, like knowing we all like suffered together, and like
Hmm.
that feeling like, wow, that really brought us together. Like we were all pissed off at first, but now that we got through that together, we're all like really happy. But I think I would imagine a lot of those Syracuse players left the field feeling very pissed off because they didn't play their best, but they still won the game. They
Hmm.
still found a way to win, and now they got embarrassed, like you said, and put through physical demand after a game, and now they're
Hmm.
probably just leaving pissed off, and that pissed off can kind of it creates breaks in the group. The culture is kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it ends up being a toxic kind of culture, and football, it's its own unique sport, and there's a lot of kind of toxicity and like alpha male type energy. So I get that, but there are leaders out there who still put demands on their players, but also are very cautious how they speak about them, putting them under the bus, so the best coaches out there can have that balance, so it's going to be interesting to kind of see that. And when you were talking about running the sand dunes, brought me back to when I was coaching my club team. And, when I was coaching them, this was now, oof, like I think they graduated out in like 2011. So it's been a while now. But, this was when regionals still meant something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where you still had a lot of top players, top teams, and we were fortunate enough to, and good enough, I'll just say, to win state every year, and so we were competing for regionals every year, and that was kind of our big goal. And what I did, because I knew I had them for a long time. I had actually started the team at U9, and I would never do this again. I don't encourage coaches to do this or teams to do this. But I did it back then, and we had a lot of different players. So I had them from U9 up to U18, and I think only two by the end of it stayed the whole time. Um, but I knew they would get tired of my voice if I was constantly on them. So I decided to do kind of like peaks. If we were going to a big tournament or some kind of college showcase, I would increase my coaching and my voice and my intensity during sessions. And then if it was like league games in Albuquerque, like we didn't really get many league games, I would just basically like get them there to training, do a few things, teach a few things, and then just let them play. So that way they weren't burnt out on my voice. And I think a lot of players, they get burnt out on hearing the coaches saying the same things at the same tone all the time. So when we were about to hit regionals, we had like kind of like our own mini camp before regionals started. And this was like a 3 or 4 week preparation. And we ran these big hills up at Balloon Fiesta Park in Albuquerque. And they knew it was coming, but they knew it was important. And it pushed them. But it set the tone for training, and it also connected with them. And they still like, when I talk to players, they still talk about those things and they still talk about the sprints. But you're right, it builds that mental toughness within yourself. But when you do it together, it just creates that, like, just that bond. Anything that you can do when you go through adversity individually and as a group, it's such a powerful medicine, but it has to be done consciously. And the players were lucky to, or the players, I was lucky that they understood that, and I explained it, and I was like, hey, this is going to help you be the most fit team out there. And we always were. We never lost due to lack of fitness. um so like, the players knew it, but it came from me, from like this is why we're doing it. It's not punishment. It's to make you better.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's communication is twofold in what you're saying. It's one, communicating with them well enough so they know the purpose behind doing something, so that they don't feel like it's punishment. And maybe the Syracuse coach did that. Maybe he did have that communication with them saying like, "Hey, listen, I'm very proud of the way you guys were resilient and got the win. But from my perspective, it appeared that we are lacking fitness in the game. We are lacking, and so I want to do sprints right now to build our fitness. It's not a punishment. I know it sucks. You're going to hate me for it. Put the work in now so that next week, when we get into the fourth quarter, we're not losing steam. We're actually, we're fit enough to get through the fourth quarter with a lot of energy." And maybe, okay, that makes sense. Even though this guy sucks, I don't want to do this. I'm not happy with him making this decision. Why can't we do this on Monday? But maybe
Mhm.
there was that communication, right? And there's an understanding, or at least an intention behind what you're doing, rather than just saying, get on the line, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
And then, yeah, maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
But there's also, I think you touched upon an interesting point when it comes to burnout, and particularly in my case, I felt a lot of burnout around hearing the coach communicate over and over and the same thing, the same time every day. We were in the meeting room, we were having a meeting, um, we were watching film, and it felt too much. Felt like this is tiring and this is exhausting. And also at the same time, there was no way I could have said, "Hey, I think that this is too much," or anyone could have really said like, "Hey, like you're losing the group here. We're not quite listening because you're communicating too much."
Hmm.
And I think, like you said, those those best coaches are really aware of what's going on. And so they're in tune with their players in order to understand, oh, maybe the group is losing momentum and exhaustion because of things that I'm doing, that I'm implementing. That's not my intention behind it, but oh, okay, that's interesting. How can I sort of change paths so that I don't cause burnout?
Hmm. Yeah, because a part of being successful at anything, especially in sports, is there has to be an imbalance, unfortunately. You have to push yourself beyond what you're typically comfortable with, and I didn't coach as a profession. I coached as a hobby.
Mm.
And I was grateful for that because I had like a real job. I owned an indoor soccer arena, so it wasn't quite a real job. But when I went from the arena to train, it was like, all right, let's do this. And I only coached one team. Most coaches who are in it, especially at the youth level, they can't just go and coach one team unless maybe they're in a professional setting where they're subsidized to do that. And even then, they have a responsibility with the first team, as an assistant or to do other things. And so, for me, I was very blessed that I created my life to be able to do that. So I understand it's an anomaly, but I coached as a hobby. Now, these coaches who are out there coaching two of their own teams and staff coach on another and director of, certain age groups, like it ends up being a lot because you're coaching for a living all of a sudden, and one thing that there are a lot of things that burn coaches out, and one of them is that, right, the amount of time that you're out there, and then you add in if they all of a sudden have a family, then it's time away from their children, and then their partners frustrated because they're not home. So that stress at home is very real and adds to it. And then, if you're coaching two or three teams, you're dealing with a lot of parents out there. And not all parents are on the, conscious path where they just trust the coach and, they trust their child's journey and, they're out there supporting and building intrinsic motivation. It's my hope that more parents get to that by like listening to us talk and by the work that I'm doing, and that you're doing, but it's not the reality right now. So, that prevents burnout in itself. And then just the schedule demands, So, and, with this imbalance, because parents have their own imbalance as well, right? That they're having to shuttle kids back and forth, especially if there's multiple kids playing sports or in different activities. They get burned out sometimes on the coach when they're not liking what their child's going through. So, all this imbalance, it's important to find balance in life. So for me, for players, it's like, okay, your body is going to burn out, so you have to support your body with certain things, and all this like energy of like doing, and it burns out the masculine side of everybody. It doesn't matter if they're male or female, by gender, so when you can balance it out with things that are more feminine, like rest, things like yoga, and how you're nourishing your body, making sure you're hydrating properly, that you're eating really healthy food. Your body is going to support your mind and your energy field, as well, and they all work hand in hand as their own team, right? The body, mind, and energy. And so it's really important. I mean, I see, and I went through this. My way of like where I got burned out was I burned my body out
Mm-hmm.
because, I was doing all kinds of things. I was coaching this team. I was running the arena. At one point, I was going to graduate school at the same time and in relationship, and all of a sudden had like a stepchild. And so my way of like releasing was going out and partying and drinking alcohol and just to like take the edge off. But I was totally like wiping myself out physically and energetically. It wasn't the best way to handle my own process. And luckily I've shifted in the last several years to be able to support my body better, and I'm like, wow, this actually feels really good, so now when life comes at me personally, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can handle this, because instead of going out and, having some margaritas and tequila, which I loved, and it was really enjoyable. Now it's like meditation. Now it's prayer. Now it's cacao. Now it's being in nature, because those things raise your frequency. And I see this a lot in coaches, of like just not eating the right foods, not drinking too much alcohol, like just to be able to survive, but it doesn't support their body, and that's how things, end up getting burned out.
Yeah, that in itself. I think we could just that's the whole thing right there, Gabe. You nailed it. We'll just put that as the podcast. No, I think that's spot on, and it's the first step is waking up and becoming aware, right? And being able to look yourself in the mirror where you're at right now and accept where you're at and to understand, yeah, I'm tired. I'm coaching two club teams and I'm the head coach of a D2 school and I'm exhausted. Well, yeah, what am I exercising? Have I gotten away from nurturing myself? Yeah. What am I eating? Oh, am I drinking? Yeah. Am I doing other things that aren't serving me anymore? Yeah, okay. And it's just taking one step at a time and recognizing that those things aren't serving you. I saw in a clip the other day of a soccer podcast of a guy talking how at soccer tournaments or I think he was just referring to like a soccer tournament. He's like, all these teams are staying in a hotel and the hotel bar is packed and the hotel gym is empty. And I was like, Dad, that's so spot on. And I think a lot of coaches would probably recognize, and I had to recognize that in myself as a player, and that's been a big part of my journey of being like, yeah, like was what I was going through real? Yeah, but what was I doing? How was I treating myself, and how was I wasn't taking ownership over myself in that moment of burnout. And I experienced deep burnout, and I think also saw another clip of a doctor talking about when athletes experience like heavy burnout, the to get them out of that takes a long time. And that's been my experience of being like, wow, I was like really deep into the burnout for a lot of different reasons. And it was like breaking that mold of like who I was. And same exact thing with you. I remember yesterday I've minimized my alcohol consumption drastically. I don't I was using marijuana as well throughout my career. Not I don't use marijuana at all anymore. I sleep great. I meditate daily, morning and night sometimes. I'm stretching, I'm practicing yoga. I'm spending time in recovery that I wasn't doing when I was playing. Yesterday I woke up at 6 a.m. with my wife. I did a workout. I went to the trampoline park with my son. I jumped hard at the trampoline place. I was a kid yesterday for an hour and a half.
Hmm.
And all day, I felt like I could go all day. It was like my energy was exploding. Like I was after my kid went, or we went after dinner, we walked to the park. I was kicking the soccer ball around, I was, juggling, kicking the ball up. And I'm like, I felt like I could keep going. And then I got to the point in the night where I was like, like I almost felt like there was that sense to like keep pushing myself, like, okay, now do work, do this. And it was like, okay, I feel so tired. My body's telling me, okay, now is time to rest and
Yeah.
being aware of where I was at. So it was an interesting experience.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the journey, right? Especially when you're so used to pushing yourself. You do that in all aspects of your life. And, I've seen that in a lot of people that, they go to extremes in a lot of different ways. For my journey, I've had to learn to slow down. And that's been a big message that I've had for years. And it's hard, for me and my personality, when I was just like, all right. No, I've had success in this way of doing things. And so this has been a new transition for me, is to learn to flow more instead of just going, going, going. And I've even had like really amazing interactions with animals. I and this is all part of kind of the shamanic element is like, animals, we learn like they can communicate with us. Sometimes a bird is just a bird, but there's sometimes where you have like certain interactions with them. And it's a little more special. It's like messages. And I had the other day, because I've been in this like kind of renaissance of my energy of like, all right, it's time to go again. I can feel it starting to happen. And I went inside my house, I came out and I have this really nice deck. And so I left my computer out here. When I came out, there was this little animal sitting on my laptop. And I just like, what is that? And I live in Costa Rica. And so there's like all kinds of unique animals that I've never seen. Even like there's still more that show up every day where I'm like, what is that? And so, it was on there and I let them be and, let the thing be. And then it like came down from my laptop and started like running around. I'm going to probably make a post on this on my Instagram. And I'm like looking at it, and it was like this big, it was tiny, but it was moving fast back and forth. And I took a closer look, and I'm like, that's a praying mantis, but I've never seen a praying mantis like that small. And then, so it just kind of moved around. I saw it somewhere else around my house later, actually, when I was doing some prayers. And then today it's been on my screen, going back into my house. And so I was like, okay, this is like definitely some kind of message. And, I looked it up and I used ChatGPT, like, hey, I've seen this animal, I've never seen a little tiny brown praying mantis, but is that, one of the possibilities? And I said, yeah, there are small ones, especially it could be a juvenile one. And so I said, okay, what's the spiritual meaning? And it was all about slowing down, staying present, and just being there, focusing on prayer, those kind of things. So it brought me back into like, hey, you can still move forward, but it doesn't have to be a sprint. It can be a nice, steady jog and make sure and rest when time comes. And that's something I think all athletes, all coaches, all parents can do a much better job of like finding those pockets of space, slowing down and really using that to like recover your energy. Even if it's deep breathing for, you know, 5 breaths is going to help just to slow the nervous system and it's going to help the body. So you have to find those little pockets of space when your life is out of balance and you're always driving, driving, driving. Find those pockets of space to really slow down, unplug, get away from the screen, chill out on the caffeine because that's something else a lot of a lot of coaches do. It's like coffee first thing in the morning, like really do the things to help you recover energetically, like eating the right things, hydrating, sleeping, like get good sleep, stay off the screen the last hour. There's so many things. I mean, I could keep going.
Yeah,
But I think you know where I'm coming from.
I know exactly where you're coming from. You're touching on a lot of good stuff. It's not, and it's about like, yeah, it's about flowing in life and then allowing that flow to like come through your work. And I think I there's a part of me that is because I was in a very difficult place towards the end of my career because of burnout. And I think I attribute it to the way I was viewing my circumstances, the not taking ownership over myself, of putting the excuse that I'm miserable because I'm miserable because they gave me this bad contract offer. And I wasn't willing to like look myself in the mirror and be like, oh, okay. And like not like shame myself, like still love myself through that process, but be like, hey, like, and start to recognize that like when you become more aware and you open yourself up through practices, whatever practice that is, for you it's different than for me, but but the same idea is the same, and it's you start to recognize and you're start to able to receive synchronicities like that. What is this animal that's showing up in my life trying
Hmm.
to tell me like, oh, and then you read that message and you probably knew right away
Hmm.
exactly why that message came
Yeah,
to you.
it's like, oh, there I go again, like 'cause you get caught up in your own stuff sometimes and you're not aware of it, right? And
Yeah.
especially when it's habitual, it's tough to break those patterns and those habits, and I consider myself a pretty aware person, but I still get caught up in the kind of old ways of being. And I'm so grateful for these messages of like, hey, dude, just remember to flow with it, and make sure and rest and recover as much as you can. It's so
Yeah.
crucial. Like I said, we're all made up physical matter, mental matter, and energetic matter. And the more we can focus on those things, like how we're expending our energy, um, making sure that we recover in the best way possible, that's going to prevent burnout as well. So it's in life as a coach, as a parent, as a player, doesn't matter. You're going to have lack of control in a lot of things. So if you focus on what you can control and you can control those type of things, then those kind of things are going to make you more resilient and less likely to burn out.
Yeah. And I think I completely agree with you. And I think the other message that's been coming across for me lately too is when I reflect back on myself at the towards the end of my career, I was looking for like quick fixes. I was like, what can I do today that's going to fix me for tomorrow? And I would try something for one day, and then I would do my same bad habits, and then I would wake up the next day and be like, am I fixed? No. And it was like what I'm recognizing now is like all this stuff is just a constant practice, constant awareness, constant understanding of what's serving me, and like scanning, like, is doing my breath work every morning serving me? 100%. It's a way better way to start my day than scrolling on my phone first thing in the morning. Hey, is exercising, is waking up and like jumping into exercise serving me? Yeah, it's making me feel better. It's time that I can spend with my wife, and it's good. My body is feeling good. It's feeling better. Yeah, keep doing that. Okay, like drinking a couple beers, like waking up the next morning being like, oh, I can recognize I didn't sleep great. Oh, yeah, that was probably attributed to that. And just constantly, and also recognizing that it's a compound effect on all this stuff to keep pursuing those things. There's no one simple fix for athletes, but it's about, like, you're showing up to practice. You didn't get good at soccer by one day of soccer practice, years and years and years of waking up to this stuff. And the other thing that I think we're both I think the message we're trying to share through sport is that these are things you can take with you for life that are just going to make your life as a whole better.
Mm. Yeah, like your soccer career, whether it's as a player, coach, or parent, is very minimal compared to the rest of your life. And you're absolutely right. Like this day-to-day discipline, if you can start, early, and be consistent, in a year, it's going to add up. It kind of reminds me of this story. I interviewed Kobe Jones, U.S. men's national team legend from back in the 90s. And I think he played, I don't know if he made it to the 2000s, but definitely in the 90s. Um, but he was talking about doing the extra work after practice. He said it doesn't need to be like 30 minutes, of after practice hitting balls. Like it's actually kind of hard, like to hit crosses, for 30 minutes straight, especially after training, but if it's even 5, 10 minutes added up, it's over a week, it's going to be actually really beneficial. And same thing can be said with meditation when people say like, oh, I don't have enough time to do it. I'm like, well, first of all, we all have the same amount of time during the day. So it really comes down to priority in your life. If you feel like you don't have enough time, you can wake up 15 minutes early and sit down and meditate. But, if you just do 5 minutes of meditation, it's going to be really impactful for you. Ideally, you want to build up to like 10, 20 minutes. But you got to start somewhere, just like soccer, right? Like you didn't,
Yeah.
you know how to juggle. You weren't born juggling a soccer ball, you know, it took
Yeah, it
years.
was hours and hours in my parents' backyard just juggling.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really stress meditation. Ultimately, all this is really related to being fully present in those moments of what's going on, and that's really hard for people, but you can do it out
Yeah.
there, people. I believe in
Yeah.
you. Chris,
Absolutely.
this has been fantastic. We haven't talked about our last episode yet, so I think it's gonna kind of be a mystery of what's coming up, unless you have some ideas.
No, I think maybe, yeah, no, we'll let it be a mystery.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Chris, how can people get a hold of you and let them know what you have going on?
Yeah, my website is www.cocreatesc.com. And I am also very active on Instagram as well as YouTube. Those are the best ways to reach me. But I offer a free 30-minute call for athletes and their parents that want to just discuss what they're going through and how I can help them on their path to whether it's reaching college, playing professional soccer, and ultimately, like I said, just having a better experience in sport and building skills that can translate to life. And how about for you, Gabe?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's beautiful. It's like, this is a man with a lot of experience in those kind of things. So take advantage. So my website is aclearmind.com. I have links to all my social media on there as well. I have some free resources and I have like this program called Raising Resilient Athletes that's for parents to help uh, their children, their athletes be more resilient in their sports journey, but it actually ends up helping the parent be more resilient as well, because it really helps them take a look at themselves and get to know themselves better so that then they can better support their athlete as well. So it's aclearmind.com. Chris, this is, as always, it's like such a pleasure. Really geek out and talking to you. I really enjoy it.
Likewise, Gabe. Thank you. You were a great coach for me, a great mentor, and I really appreciate like you sharing your message because I'm writing down things that I'm learning from you over here. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure that other people are going to find your wisdom extremely valuable.
Thanks. I appreciate that. All right, y'all. We'll see
All
you
right.
next time.
See you next week.